When the Nintendo Switch 2 launched last year, it came with GameCube games on the NSO service, but regular Switch 1 owners would not see this update. It seemed like regular Switch was not powerful enough for GameCube emulation. However, this is not entirely true. What you're seeing here is Tico, a custom emulation front end specifically designed for the Nintendo Switch 1. It takes a controller-first interface and is designed with a very simple and clean user interface that maximizes performance, simplicity, and what the team calls long-term portability. Tico is essentially a front end that allows for many open source emulators to run games. Nothing new here, right? However, what's interesting here is that recently an update to the application has seen Sega Saturn emulation included in February, and just more recently and more exciting, GameCube and Nintendo Wii games via Dolphin, and the results are very impressive. Put side by side the NSO Switch 2 version of Luigi's Mansion running on the Switch, you can see here that it's running under Tico exceptionally well. Emulation front ends aren't new. Take RetroArch, one of the longest running emulation front ends in existence. RetroArch is many things, but it is not a user-friendly experience. Much of the time in RetroArch, you're spending countless hours configuring, browsing file menus, searching for that single option buried 4 levels deep in the menus for that one thing that you're looking for. Tico replaces all this with a simple-to-use interface with only really 3 main pieces: game organization, asset management, and emulation cores. It requires almost zero user configuration, but it still has settings menus for advanced users to tweak just in case you need to get a little more complicated. As an example, for any type of game that you play, holding down the plus and minus buttons will bring up the in-game menu. From here, you can save and load your state, adjust your settings, and exit the emulator. All the games that you run via Tico already have button mappings applied, so you can just jump in and play. Now, it does go without saying that Tico natively runs on a modded Nintendo Switch and allows for native ARM64 emulators such as Dolphin to run without the need to switch to Android or Linux. Now, if you are someone that is familiar with the Switch modding scene, downloading and installing it and setting it all up should be very easy for you to do. Just simply install it onto your SD card and then launch into the NRO as you normally would. There is a comprehensive GitHub and wiki page that will walk you through where you need to put your ROMs just in case you want to set that up. And for GameCube and Nintendo Wii emulation, there is no further files that you need to install. There is no BIOS files that are required. But I did mention that Tico is a front end for many different emulators. Now, these emulators are not provided with the distribution. When you first run Tico, what you'll need to do is download them individually, depending on the emulators that you want. Not only this, you must go into the experimental menu and enable the checkbox for GameCube and Nintendo Wii. This also outlines that for Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii emulation, an overclock must be provided. This is of course to get some good performance out of GameCube and Wii games running on the Switch 1. Without it, the games will run a lot worse. But there is more to Tico than just GameCube and Nintendo Wii. That is, of course, the focus of this particular video, but I do want to outline there's also emulation cores available for the Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, and even the Sony PlayStation Portable. The Dreamcast and Sega Saturn will require BIOS files. So with providing the appropriate BIOS images and your ROM files, you can now go into the Tico menu and scan your ROMs. From here, you can even download covers and apply them to your favorites menu. When you launch into Tico, this menu will be the first thing that you see, and from here you can easily select a game on any one of these emulation cores. And the user experience overall is exceptional. And I've been spending the last week or so testing out various games running under GameCube, Nintendo Wii, Sega Saturn, and even Sega Dreamcast emulation. And the results overall here are very impressive. Now, for Nintendo Wii and Nintendo GameCube, you're still going to see a pretty low compatibility, but the emulation is improving with every single build, and it seems like now that we're at the .071 release, the stability is getting much better. I'm seeing games that weren't running on the previous 0.70 version are now running on 0.71. And what's even more impressive is that Nintendo Wii games are running exceptionally well via Tico, even games such as Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, although while in the game is still running quite slow, the menus and the snappiness of the emulation is very, very promising. Another game that I tested was Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition, which is something that I didn't really expect to run very well on Tico on the Nintendo Switch, and as you can see here, it runs exceptionally well. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but overall the emulation quality here is great. Another game that is kind of known for being quite demanding via Dolphin emulation is Eternal Darkness. Again, under Tico, it ran at 60 frames per second. It does have some stutter and some slowdown, but I believe this is most likely due to shader compilation. Zack and Wiki was another Nintendo Wii game that I tried, at least in the early intro section, and that ran exceptionally well. Now I will say I was unable to get the controls working correctly for some reason. I'm not sure if I need to do some configuration here. I ran some PlayStation Portable games via PSP, and the God of War game here ran pretty well. Now of course this is only running 1x native resolution, so we're not doing any type of native resolution upscaling, which I think would significantly hurt performance, but running PSP games at this level of performance on my Nintendo Switch is something that I've never been able to do. I also tried out Sega Saturn emulation via Yaba Sanshiro. This ran pretty well for the most part. There's definitely some slowdown with Virtua Fighter 2, but this is also a very demanding game, and it does use the high resolution mode. As well as this, I ran Dreamcast emulation. This is Grandia 2, and this game did not miss a beat. And this is running the Flycast emulator in the back end, and overall, very, very impressed. Now, of course, the main reason why we're using Tico is for GameCube and Nintendo Wii, and having the ability to basically take as many Nintendo games and have them available on one particular system is really the big draw card. This was something that I wanted to accomplish on the Nintendo Wii U with GameCube and Nintendo Wii backward compatibility, as well as things like Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, NES, and previous systems. But the Switch with GameCube and Nintendo Wii really is the closest thing to having an all-in-one system that can play every single Nintendo game up into the Nintendo Switch. Of course, Nintendo DS and 3DS is currently not available, but who's to say that Tico won't come with a Melon DS core later on. Now, the secret sauce to the GameCube game running so well on Tico is because it's doing some automatic overclocking. Now, in the back end, what it's doing is that it's applying an automatic overclock of 1.7 GHz on the CPU and 768 MHz on the GPU, regardless if you're running in handheld or in docked mode. Now, this of course is required as many of the GameCube and Wii games won't run as well as normal. But if you do have SysClock installed or Horizon OC and UltraHand, then it's possible to push those clocks even further and get even better levels of performance, which is what I think a lot of people are going to do, especially if you own a Mariko Revision Nintendo Switch, which has a high overhead for really boosting those clocks above 2 GHz across the board. So yes, if you do have a modded Nintendo Switch, maybe you've upgraded to a Switch 2 and your modded Nintendo Switch is sitting in your drawer, then this may be a reason for you to charge the batteries up and take a look. This was definitely a reason for me to charge up my OLED Switch after about a year of it sitting in a drawer, and I'm happy that I did, because the results here are very impressive. Right now, Tico and GameCube emulation is still in a very much an alpha state. However, with overclocking tools at our disposal, we can boost those frame rates and get some really excellent performance out of many games. Compatibility list testing is ongoing, and right now it's fair to say that it's still around 30 to 40% of all games that are considered playable. But there are already reports of stable performance across many games. Titles such as Metroid Prime, Luigi's Mansion, and even Wii games such as Super Mario Galaxy are all up and running. And this poses an interesting discussion. The Nintendo Switch Online service has a very limited GameCube selection on Switch 2, and yet on a Nintendo Switch we can run a lot more GameCube and even Nintendo Wii games, something that the Switch 2 is currently incapable of doing. For me, this is a very exciting prospect, because ultimately, enthusiasts have always wanted a Nintendo system that ran every single game before it, and Nintendo's official GameCube rollout for Switch 2 has been extremely slow, with only a handful of games releasing for the system, and it seems like they're only really addressing updates and fixing bugs rather than adding more titles. Titles such as Twilight Princess and Super Mario Sunshine are still not available on the NSO, but both titles are perfectly playable on Tico. So of course, once again, it's up to the community to fill in that gap, albeit on the Nintendo Switch. You can play literally hundreds of Nintendo GameCube and Wii titles via Tico on your Nintendo Switch 1, but somehow you can only play a very small smattering of GameCube titles on your Switch 2 via an online service that you have to pay a yearly subscription for. But ultimately, Tico is one of the most exciting things that I've seen in Nintendo Switch Homebrew in a very long time, and overall I think this service is only going to get better. And as mentioned, if you do have a modded Nintendo Switch and you want to check it out for yourself, I will leave a link to the GitHub page in the description below, and let me know your thoughts about Tico in the comments below, how you're faring with it, what games are running well for you. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. But for now, we're going to leave it here for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.